Welcome to Inspiring Conversations. My name is Ekta, and I'm the author of the book The Voice of Cardi and co-founder of AIM Author in Me, where we give a platform to writers of diverse ages and cultures to come and share their stories. And I'm very delighted to have Raghav Khanna with me here. And he's someone who is a prolific storyteller and also a documentary maker and producer. But I'll let Raghav introduce himself. So welcome to the Inspired Conversations. And
thank you, Ekta, for that introduction. I am Raghav Khanna, originally from India, currently based in Singapore. And I have recently written this book, Sita's Kitchen. It's a novel, a coming-of-age story of a self-taught chef who tries to follow her dreams and make it big in the cutthroat culinary world in London. So I hope you all read it and enjoy it, and it brings you joy. About me, I am a storyteller by profession as well. I work in the film and entertainment industry. I've been working as a director, producer, writer, and now a studio executive. So I've donned many hats with regards to this industry, and I really love what I do for a living. And I see writing my debut novel as an extension of that, because upwards of a decade in this industry and in this business, I realized that we are we are rapidly transforming into a phase where, while technology is creating these new platforms and mediums, it's also blurring them. And at the core of what people need and what storytellers need to come up with is great stories. Whether you're watching them, whether you're reading them, whether you're listening to them, a great story will find its readers, audience, and viewers in this day and age more than it has before. So that's something that I want to leave with all the aspiring writers, storytellers, that this is the best time to be telling a story.
yes, I completely agree with you. With the variety of platforms that we have, yes, we do. But, talking about decades back, it wasn't easy to think of yourself as a writer. When did this journey really begin for you? When did you really decide that this is it? This is what I want to do?
That is an interesting question. And I'll have to go really back in life. If I have to look back at my journey, like most of the kids in India, I grew up being obsessed with cricket. But by the time I reached a point in life during my early teenage, that what can you meaningfully do to be employable, make a living out of? I think telling stories was the obvious choice and answer, because during school, English and Hindi, studying these two languages gave me a lot of comfort. It was somewhere too good to believe that you're being prescribed to read stories, and that somewhere stayed. So I went on to do my graduation in English literature, but at the same time, I was watching an awful lot of films from world over, and television as well, the good ones and the not so good ones. And at the same time, I was using my old clunky computer to read up about the filmmakers, about the authors, the legendary playwrights from here in the past, and try to weave these small pieces, imbibe this knowledge all together. After that, it became clear that there is an art to storytelling, but you also have to learn it as a craft. And that craft came to me as filmmaking. When I was doing this during the mid 2000s, filmmaking was still a very traditional medium. The digital advent had not happened as much as we've seen it in the last 7-8 years. Films were still being shot on literally film, the 35mm film. DSLR revolution had not gripped indie and amateur filmmakers. So when I started out and made my first film, I still remember it was on one of those mini DVDs I had borrowed from a friend. And you used to write and rewrite on tapes. So for me, storytelling as a medium has always remained at the heart of what I want to do. And it evolved into a craft, which is filmmaking, got further subclassified into documentary filmmaking. But reading and writing literature, or writing a novel precisely, is something that I've just published, but it's not that I just wrote it. The writing journey also goes back years. in the making.
That's what I was thinking as you were saying that, it's not a journey of a year or two. It's a journey that begins right when the seed of the love of storytelling comes in your heart. You start observing, which is, I do believe in the power of observation. And we have this technique which we use with our people who come to learn the art of writing with us, children especially, with whom I work with. That is the power of observation. What is that power of observation? What has it done to you? Because I believe when you were growing up and you were watching these movies, somewhere in your subconscious mind, you were observing certain characters, certain people, and somewhere your new story has taken shape from there. So what does observation mean to you?
I think for most art forms, and not only art forms, be it applied arts, fine arts, one has to be an observer of life, of emotions, of the society, of the politics that we are in, and have a deep understanding of that observation as well. So for me, I'll take the word observation, but also give it a new dimension where it's perception. Okay. You have to be perceptive about what's happening in and around you. It definitely also comes from observation. And one thing which I emphasize a lot as a writer is empathy. Because you have to see each situation, each moment, and the world at large from other people's perspective. At some point, you have to suspend your own biases, your own set of customs, traditions, and everything that influences your thinking. And you have to imbibe and acquire it from multiple people. That's, for me, one way to be authentic to your characters and your story. Otherwise, there's a lot of you that becomes repetitive in your work. Soon you'll run out of it.
That's so well said. So when you write a character, you're obviously you're observing and you're taking something from there and something from your own life. So from life, the stories sprout from life, isn't it?
Exactly. It's whether life follows art or art follows life. It's the chicken and egg question. But if one was to imitate the other, then I would certainly say that art is a product of life as we see it. But art at large holds the immense potential to inspire life in turn.
Interesting. You make it sound very easy. The way you're saying you fell in love with stories, and then you did your English literature. I'm sure there must be many obstacles, and for someone who's listening to you and thinking, well, that's the path for me. Let's say a teenager, because that's when you really started to build that dream in your heart. What is there that they can expect in that journey?
I don't want to dissuade anyone, but it has to be simple. It can't be complex or difficult, because your profession is probably the most dominant thing in your life after you hit adulthood. There may be a rare few people who don't need to work for a living, but I believe most of us have to work to make ends meet. And let it be something that you won't get bored of easily. Let it be something that you look forward to, because at least I believe that only that can take you the long mile. So if you want to be a painter, by all means go and paint, and then it's your dedication, your talent, and a little bit of stars aligning on whether you're painting walls or your museums or your paintings are being exhibited in museums. Similarly, as a filmmaker, it's not the hegemony of a particular industry or a particular size of the budget. You want to make films, you have the means in your phone itself. So the process is so democratic right now that you can make a film on your phone, you can upload it on YouTube. It doesn't cost a penny to do either of them, except for the logistical part of owning a phone and having an internet. And it's out there. that privilege was not there as recent as 15 years ago.
True.
And same with writing the story. Everybody knows how to write. Everybody is not a writer. Everybody has a camera in their phone. Everybody is not a photographer. So be it writing, be it becoming an architect or a carpenter or anything it is, just be sure that this won't bore you out. One thing I can tell anybody who's wanting to come into arts or entertainment is, don't come for glamour. It's not glamorous. And that's one way to fall flat on your face if glamour is what's attracting you to this industry. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of perseverance that's required of you. It's a lot of discipline. Just recently, I'm in the middle of reading Will Smith's biography, Autobiography, and I must recommend it to everyone. What a beautiful book it is.
He's a very inspiring man himself.
Yeah.
What's the name of the biography?
It's called Will.
It's called Will. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I like the fact that you have not stressed on the success being the paramount. It has to be the journey that has to, evolve you as a writer.
It has to be. I think that's the root cause of unhappiness, is when we start constructing parameters of success in our head. If writing or painting is what gives you joy, then that's what you do. And beyond a point, you surrender after you've released or published your work or put it out in the domain. And after that, it's also about how much support you're getting from the peers around you. Who's your publisher? Who's your art dealer? Who's exhibiting you? What kind of talent do you have? You may be very talented and writing or depicting something that may not be the need of your audience or the readers, and that won't guarantee success either. So commercial success is such a narrowly defined and overemphasized aspect of everything that we are doing in this day and age, that I think it takes away the charm from the journey. And as long as you have that ability to fall in love and stay in love with the journey, that destination will not matter.
Beautiful, beautifully expressed. Tell me, Raghav, what's more effective? A complex concept and simple characters, or a simple concept and complex characters? Or both?
It depends. I think this is to each her or his own. When I write something, my intention is always make it accessible. It's not to say that your writing or your subject and plots can't have deeper meanings or your characters can't be led. But I'm also mindful that we live in a time where people have countless distractions and multiple options to go to. So the ability to retain your audience or readers sooner or later will loom upon you. And that for me is like one of the very definitive parameters on how you can preempt your own success is retention. If you look at publishers or television networks, theaters, streaming services, they are all initially going for a wider fishnet, and then they're going for retention. And as a storyteller, it may be too prudent for anyone to think that they're bulletproof from it, but that is a litmus test for you as a storyteller, if you're able to retain your readers or audience or listeners.
Now, we work with children. I mean, I've worked with children as young as 7-year-old who come to us to write stories. And I completely believe that writing a story is a way of instilling the positive values in them and confidence, especially in a country like the UK, which has got diverse cultures, but not enough diversity in the publishing range of books available. So I do find that some children who are struggling with their own identity of understanding who they are, writing becomes a very powerful tool of expression. How far do you think that it's important for children to understand this power of storytelling?
I would refrain from formalizing it or making it something that drives them away. But I have a 4-year-old daughter myself, and she loves listening to stories, and she's at a point where she started creating them slowly as well. And it takes me back to my previous point is, are you able to engage and entertain through your stories? That is the first milestone. That is the first step. Then come in the deeper meanings of what you're trying to do. So as a young creator, as somebody who's not even attained teenage yet, just do it for fun. Just like
in an unstructured way.
Yeah, do it in a way which gives you fun, which gives you enjoyment, and that's it. Tell the story, and there are no wrongs in the world of storytelling.
Absolutely. And I suppose when they start going to school, they have to follow a certain set of segments of, this is right and this is wrong in terms of writing. But it's important to allow them to express themselves in a very unadulterated way.
Exactly. Like storytelling is one medium where the sun can rise from the west and set in the east, where the roofs can go upwards. And it's completely all right to do that as long as you can convince your readers that you're doing this. So that's the kind of like they should completely have a blue sky and a white slate when they are thinking and when they are telling stories, and let their heart and their imagination guide them.
Yes, and understand that every thought is unique, which is what I believe stories do to us.
Yes.
So documentary making, how different has that experience been to actually writing stories and capturing real life?
Documentary filmmaking is basically taking some aspects of journalism, which is probably journalistic integrity, but at the same time taking the traditional storytelling which you find in books or feature films as well. For me, documentary initially became something that I was inclined to do because I found fascination in life as it unfolded in front of me. Like I said, that during my formative years when I was watching a lot of films and thinking of myself to become a filmmaker, I would, from a misty Delhi winter morning, a train would emerge and I would hear that sound and see that visual and get excited and think that what a beautiful visual it'll make when you'll probably end up filming it for a feature film. I'll see a face and I'll see those layers of expressions, those deep eyes, and I'll be like, wow, that's a character worth capturing, and what kind of backstory will that character have? But soon I realized that you don't need to wait for it to transform into a feature film or for you to then add to it your layers of imagination and write it as a fictitious story. Life is unfolding and you can capture it in an artistic manner. So that was the genesis of my inclination for documentary filmmaking. I also, as a part of my growing up, saw a lot of good documentaries, some of which the BBC had made, which were not very widely available back in the day, but there were pirated copies of those which I used to get from Connaught Place on DVDs and watch them. And at some point, this love for culinary arts, curiosity and inclination about history, seeing how technology is taking over the world, gave me a sense of self-assumed responsibility that you have to document your present and your past in a way which can be reflected upon later. And it's not just factual documentation, it is with a narrative, with a lens. And that's where documentary filmmaking achieves its better form. I won't call it highest because there's no limit to it, and certainly I am far from it. But that's what separates documentation from documentary filmmaking, is you add a perspective to it, you add a narrative layer to it while dealing with the same facts in real life as it unfolds.
And it must be you must be feeling so responsible, because here you don't have to put your own imagination. You have to capture life as it is in its most purest form, and then add your narrative.
I would say that, and especially after writing Sita's Kitchen, that I can now weigh them on scale evenly, non-fiction or documentary making, and writing or making something in the scripted or fictitious world. You have to have editorial integrity. You can't take away from it. When you're working in the non-fiction or documentary space, you have to be true to your subject, true to the character, the research and the facts you're working with. When you're working in the fictional space, you still have to be true to the character. In fact, it's a little more difficult to do that in the scripted space, because it's not a real person, it's a person you've constructed. So that's where I was talking about empathy, that every step, every decision that this person is making will have to align with the overall character arc, as you call it, or the person that you've constructed in your head, as if that person was real. So if suppose you decide to wear a certain color someday, does it hold special relevance? If it has no relevance, I should not be mentioning that color.
So you do a lot of research, or before you start to write?
Yes. I don't know if you've seen Raja Rasoi or Anya Kahaniyan. It's a series which catalogs
beautifully captured.
Indian food history, and I've intertwined culture, history, and food as well in that series. And writing that was not so much about writing as it was about reading and experiencing cuisine and culture firsthand. I did that at a very young age, and that habit stayed on. That whenever you're making something, you invest a lot of your energy in getting the research right. Now, research can be this vast, endless ocean with no ends in sight. So it has to have a method, a methodology, and you can standardize it. You can modify it according to each project you're doing and according to the needs of each available material. But you have to bring some sense to what you're embarking upon, in terms of story. And for unscripted, it's very streamlined for me, because there are facts, there are expert opinions, there are characters on which you base it and you lay it down. For fiction, there is a lot of reading that goes into similar material that's previously existing, just not to basically get influenced, but just to be aware of how similar time spans were handled by others.
Interesting. So talking about this new book that you have, Sita's Kitchen, interesting title. What is this book about?
Sita's Kitchen is the story of a self-taught chef from the Himalayas, and she tries to make it big in London as a chef. It is her coming of age story. She's not perfect, she's far from it. She has her own flaws. There is no miracle at play to make things work for her. It's a journey which has a lot of pitfalls, a lot of perseverance, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that kind of journey, as I think life does it with all of us. But it is about how she endures everything that comes in her stride, but stays true to her dream, stays true to her passion. She'll meet people who'll try to sabotage her. She'll meet people who'll take her under her wing. Life will throw her off, but in the end, she keeps her eyes on the sight. She follows her heart.
Interesting. So it's a motivational story with, I think, deep life lessons. It's a true story, I would believe. That's what truth is.
It is a work of fiction, and I've tried to make it a light read, so it's not something that you will possibly feel weighed down by if you read it. From what the readers have told me is that most of them have finished in 2 sittings over a weekend. It's 220 odd pages, and they've said it's a breezy read. It's set in Himachal Pradesh, then the story moves to London. So these are the 2 physical places in which the story is based. Early in my career as a television producer and director, I directed numerous food series and food shows. So I've borrowed a lot from my learnings of that time to try and accurately represent the cuisine which I've mentioned in this book. A lot of it is a fragment of my imagination, especially the fusion food that she's made. But coming back to the factual accuracy point, I had a fair bit of understanding of the culinary world, and on the basis of which I wrote this book. But to be accurate to a profession, to be accurate to a craft, I reached out to a few friends who are chefs, and I also hired a couple of them, especially, to read this book and tell me if I am depicting their industry and profession aptly or not. So that for me is the editorial integrity I was talking about.
Interesting. So this character, when did this character take birth in your mind? What were you inspired by? Himalayas? Was it a travel?
Yes, I was traveling through the Himalayas in 2017, and I vividly remember it was for a shoot, and we had stopped to have breakfast at a place, and the food was just outstanding. The next 4 or 5 hours, I was still on the road, as it is in the north in Himachal, that reaching from place A to place B sometimes can take an entire day, and that's what happened to me. And while I was sitting in the back seat of the car, the scenery, the food just gave birth to this character, and it mulled itself over a period of time and took form as this person, and what would be her surroundings, what kind of background does she come from, what would be her sensibilities, her belief system, what would trigger her to go to London, what happens when she's there, and what is her journey there on, who are the other interesting characters who walk in and out of the story. So it's originally I had conceived it as a screenplay, and I was almost tempted to write it as a screenplay, but I realized that when you're writing for film or television, consciously or subconsciously, at least for me, because primarily I am a producer, there is that back of your head, there is always that consideration that, okay, what will it take to materialize it on screen? Be it in terms of finances, logistics, and that I felt was somewhere limiting my writing, and I wanted to give it a shot to write it as a novel in a more traditional and a free-flowing form. And I did that, and thankfully Rupa Publications came on board after I had written the story, and they were more than happy to publish it.
So do you have this little notepad with you every time you're inspired by something, like you just saw, you went to this place and then you just make a short note of what inspired you?
Exactly that, but in a different form. I do maintain a diary on my desk, but don't carry a notepad with me wherever I go, but I do have my phone. So I have this virtual note in there which runs into like hundreds of pages sometimes, because these are abstract and ad hoc ideas, dialogues, character inspirations, which you may be getting for a project, and you're just noting them all down. And once a week, once a month, when you sit down and try to formalize it in terms of your writing, you just jot them down properly.
So how long was it, this whole journey of writing this book for you, from the time you conceived it till the time it was written?
So Sita's Kitchen took an interesting journey. I traveled to Himachal in 2017, and upon return, I started writing it soon after. I think I was done with the first draft within 6 months. It didn't take me much time. And then I left it on the back burner and revisited another like 3-4 months later, life carried on. You got busy with things that were probably came with uh, a deadline attached, and the projects I do. And then one day I revisited it, and I rewrote it. In the sense, I edited it drastically, just the plot. And this happened at the start of 2019, so it's already like 12, 13 months into it. And then finally I let it be. I was going through a lot fair share in my personal and professional life. I had a little girl, so raising her, moving country, moving city, new work, all of that took over. And one day during the pandemic, I was just browsing my email and I found this attachment, and I remembered that I have this entire book written with me, and I've done nothing about it for the last year and a half. So I gave it a read, polished it up a bit, reached out to a publisher. Rupa came on board. And by then we were already in the thick of the pandemic. So I did add slight elements to make it more relevant. So those details about the pandemic, they were added in reflection just around the time when I was editing the book with the publisher. And then from there on, it took another good almost 8-9 months. By the time like we had a few rounds of editing, proofreading with the publisher before it got out finally.
Writer's block. What do you do when you have that? Do you actually have that? Because you're writing so many different things.
It's something that I've learned to overcome now. There is this word in Urdu and Hindi called Hawa, if you're aware of it.
Yes.
It's basically that's what writer's block is. It's disproportionately big in people's head, where it's nothing. And I don't recollect who said it, but it goes like this: that amateurs seek inspiration, professionals get up and go to work. Even in his book, Will Smith says, in reference to a particular anecdote, that get up and lay another brick, which is about how do you build a wall? Just get up and lay another brick. And that for me is a tested way to break this so-called writer's block, is sit and write. It may be bad. You may just throw it out next day. You may rewrite it. Sit and write. If you can't write, then, and this is for me like gold dust, this is like a secret sauce which I'm revealing here. If you're in a position where you're unable to write, read what you've already written. Because that'll keep the engine going.
Interesting.
If I'm not able to write, I start from 5 pages, stop, read, and by the time I'm done, I'm like, okay, now I want to write further.
Yeah, sometimes you're inspired by your own work. I find that because my first thing, the first thing that I do in the morning is write, whatever it may be. I mean, article or whatever it may be. I may have seen something, felt something, I write. And sometimes I wonder, and I've as many writers I've spoken to, everyone says exactly what you're trying to say here, that sometimes you become your own inspiration. Because for me, writing is a kind of a meditation, to be frank. It's the way I interpret life. I suppose for you as well, maybe that is the way you see writing as, isn't it? And coming back to the book again, very interesting character. What I was really intrigued was that when you were, I know you've been a very experienced writer, but for someone who's writing the first novel, the protagonist often people try to create that protagonist someone they can relate to, but this is a completely different character that you created, Sita's Kitchen, and gave her this name. And we spoke earlier that somehow it reminded me of that thing that Sita Rasoi or the thing that we heard from our elders. So what was the reason you chose this name and you chose this girl? Why not a male character as a protagonist, which you could probably more relate to?
Well, I'll have to break it down, so bear with me. As a writer, this was far more challenging and far more exciting. And that's what I mean by not getting bored, because I was pushing myself
Yes.
to think from a rural girl's perspective. I am a male born in urban India with fair amount of privilege, not a great degree, but with a fair amount of privilege in the Indian context. So for me to displace all of that and think from a girl's perspective who's from rural India in the mountains and does not come from privilege was very challenging as a writer, and that was the most rewarding part also. That's what made sure that those early mornings and late nights were never tired, because I have to be authentic to the person and the character I'm depicting. And for that, you have to borrow a lot from your previous experiences. You have to be observant, perceptive, and sometimes go out and seek new experiences to validate what you're trying to do. So that was the challenging and exciting part of the journey. And there are male characters in the book as well. It's not like Sita is the only character, and she doesn't have outsized weightage also, though she is the protagonist. But giving her perspective, making the story revolve around her in certain ways was exciting that way. In terms of how the world she comes from, it also allowed me to look at and reflect upon the gender dynamics within India and the world at large. It could have been a male, but it would have been a relatively easier journey, generally speaking, for a man to take, because especially in rural India, the way the society is constructed, it's a lot more difficult for women to do anything. You just have to admit it. That's how it is. I'm glad it's changing at a rapid pace. Not as fast as it can, but still better than where it was. And those obstacles, even though I've lightly placed them, I've not tried to be preachy around them, are what gives that journey, that edge, that narrative graph, because waking up and surviving the day is a challenge for a girl, is what I believe. And I say this after having closely seen, having interacted with a lot of people from that area. And as somebody who's grown up in India, been very close to his mother, aunts, sister, it's something that you're aware of, that there is a lot of privilege that men take for granted.
Thank you for addressing that.
Yeah.
Not many men would think, but I was pleasantly surprised when I read the character, and I was like, that is such a unique thing. And also, why London? Is there a particular reason why she comes to London?
One of the reasons is that originally I was thinking that her journey will be from Himachal to Mumbai. And that's what was there in the rough draft also. It would have been a little too believable again, because it's a journey you can take. London made it a little more challenging, unbelievable, but achievable, if I was to say. So it was the maximum extent I could go to in terms of what is the furthest thing that you can reach, which is still not outlandish. Why London also happened when I was in London around 2019. And for me, one of the ways to experience a city is through its architecture and through its food. So I try to eat at places where the locals eat and take a lot of public transport, just get lost in unknown avenues, vistas, lanes. And I was dividing my meals between fine dine gourmet meals, street food, junk food, everything London had to offer. So it was a very wide variety of food I was eating. And I realized that this story is probably better placed if she comes to London. Also, it allowed me to bring in that diaspora angle, which I think is prevalent in London. My other main character is Arun. He's basically a British, but of Indian ancestry, of Indian heritage. And that I think you know it better in some way, that a lot of diaspora could relate to, a lot of NRIs could relate to, people who have Indian heritage. Other places also provide that. Singapore provides it. New York possibly has a lot of Indians there. But I think London, because of that colonial past, that link is a little deeper and stronger.
Yeah, I get where you are coming from. And in some ways, like you said, it added another challenge, because there is this girl who is probably not speaking English. English is not her first language, and then she comes to this country, and it gives that dimension to it. So Raghav, I will very naturally ask you next, what are the tips that you would like to give to aspiring writers?
I've not yet reached a point where I could be giving tips to others. There's still a massive learning curve I myself am on. But having done whatever little I've done so far, and especially with this book, if somebody's serious about writing, then discipline and consistency is going to take you where you want to reach. Don't expect a miracle. You will not write that best opening, that best character in one single sitting. It doesn't happen like that. Just take the hammer, take the chisel, keep at it. Do it every day. If you miss it one day, it's okay. If you miss it twice, that's not okay. So you have to be disciplined about it if you want to write. And you can break it down. A novel minimum is 55,000 words, roughly translating into 200 pages. 200 pages means even if you write 1 page a day, and that's ambitious to write 1 page a day, finally edited work, it'll take you 200 days to write your first book. Then begins the journey of reaching out and trying to publish it.
Which is, I suppose, the harder journey, especially for someone who's not as experienced as you in that industry. I suppose that's where I feel some of the writers just give up. They will write and then they will just stop there because they don't see any light to it. But it's about perseverance, isn't it?
It's exactly that. Possibly, yes. Publishing remains difficult, but it's still become democratic. You can publish your book. You can self-publish your book. It doesn't take anything out of you to just self-publish your book, format it on. There are a couple of services out there. You can format it and self-publish it and try reaching out to the readers. For me, as long as there's one person out there who's not friends and family and is willing to read my work, that's it. That's the person I'm writing for.
And as a writer, what dimensions would you dream to achieve further? As in, like you said, you want more challenges. Is it another book or a documentary?
It doesn't need to be either or. I love making films. I love to write books now. And my next book is taking form in my head right now. The characters, the situations, they're making me wake up and making me go to sleep with those last thoughts and first thoughts. So sooner or later, I'll write it. And I'm also very excited to make my next film. It's something that I really love to do.
Interesting. And this book, Sita's Kitchen, is it available in the UK for us to buy?
Yes, it's all available on Amazon and it's available on Kindle. So you could order the hard copy or you could just purchase the Kindle copy and it'll be with you straight away.
Fabulous. Well, I really want to thank you for your time today. And you've taken us to a very deep storytelling. I've almost traveled with you from, your childhood to what leads you, what inspires you to where you are. And may you keep making more and more beautiful movies, documentaries, and write more and more beautiful stories. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ekta. Pleasure talking.